And I'm now joined by Gonzalo Tristão Santos, my colleague from Portugal. You had a really busy weekend as well, as Porto celebrated winning the title, right? So that meant you were on shift. It's a big success for the club. What has it been like for Porto winning the title?
Yeah, so I think that this title is very important to Porto for very different reasons. The first one being that um, talking about the big three clubs in Portugal, so Porto, Benfica, and Sporting, Porto was the one who haven't won the league for the most time. They weren't champions since 2022, so 4 years without winning the league title. That's a lot for a club like FC Porto, but they now managed to win the league, and I think that one of the keys of Porto's success this season was the way they performed at the Transfermarkt, not only in the summer transfer window, but also in the winter transfer window. I mean, in the summer, and we have to remember this, Porto has a new coach, or had a new coach in the beginning of the season, but also had almost an entirely new team. They bought a lot of new players. They also sold some players that were in the team last season. And so with the new coach and with the new team, they still managed to win the league. And even more surprisingly than that, maybe, is that Porto has done or has achieved the best first half of the league in the history of the Portuguese league. They won 16 out of 17 matches, so they made 49 out of 49 points out of 51. And like I said, they had a new manager and a new team, a lot of new players, and they still managed to start the season very strong, to win the matches against Braga and Porto and Sporting. So, the only match they drew in the first half of the league was against Mourinho's Benfica. So yeah, I was really surprised because, like I said, new manager, new team, and they still managed to win a lot of games, and in the end, they managed to win the league. So it was a fantastic team, fantastic season. I mean, to them, and I think they really deserve this title.
I mean, 85 points now after 32 games.
Yeah, and
9
still 2
points
games
ahead of
to go.
Benfica. Yeah, it's an incredible record. They could end the season with 91 points. So that shows you just the dominance that they had over the Portuguese the league this year, right? And as you mentioned, there's always two competitors as well with Benfica and Sporting. How surprised were you that they won the title this year?
Very surprised. I mean, if you asked me that question like 1, 2, or maybe 3 months ago, I wouldn't be so surprised. But if you asked me that in the beginning of the season, I wouldn't say Porto was the favorite to win the title because, as I said before, they had a new manager and a lot of new players. So I was expecting them to take a little longer to achieve success. But the truth is that they bought so many good players, and Farioli just showed us that he's a very good manager, and the work was so well done that, like I said, in the beginning of the season, I think no one was expecting Porto to win the league, or at least to win the league this way, with still 2 matches to go. Like you said, with 85 points in 32 matches, I think no one was expecting this, but they were really, really strong. And so yeah, I was surprised at the beginning of the season, but not anymore, because they just showed that they were the best team. They were clearly better and more consistent than Benfica and Sporting. And so after we saw them play along the season in the last months, after that it was not a surprise anymore that Porto won the league, and it was just a matter of days to see Porto winning the league.
I mean, it's also impressive because they lost both Luke de Jong and Samu Ajewo with injuries. Samu in particular, a player that has been listed on the transfer market, as a potential player to leave, and his market value has skyrocketed over the last few years. And to lose both these players, experienced strikers, and still end up winning the league is a testament on how deep the squad was.
Yeah, and I really think that one of the keys to Porto's title was the way they performed in the transfer market. I mean, if you look at Porto's squad, they started the season with three strikers: Samu, Luke De Jong, and Dennis Gul.
Mm-hmm.
And Luke De Jong was injured for the whole season, already in the first months of the season, and so they decided to bought another striker in the winter transfer window, which was Tarem Moffi. And then some weeks later, Samu also got injured. So at that moment, we saw how important it was to buy a new striker in the winter transfer window, because they now had Dennis Gul and Moffi to the rest of the season. Of course, that Dennis Gul and Moffi are not so good as Luke De Jong and especially Samu. Samu is Porto's best striker by far. But
Yeah.
for instance, if we look at Sporting, who was fighting with Porto for the title until some point of the season, maybe until April, Sporting only had two strikers in their squad, and then one of them, Ioannidis, gets also injured until the end of the season, and so they had to play almost every match with the same striker, which is
Mm-hmm.
Luis Suarez, who had a great season. As you know, he's Gyökeres replacement and Sporting, and he did surprisingly well. I mean, I'm not saying that Sporting fans don't miss Gyökeres anymore. Of course they do, but the truth is that the way Sporting managed to replace him was very good, but I think they failed in buying another striker. Porto did that, and I think that's one of the keys for their success, because they had in the beginning of the season three strikers, one gets injured, they buy another one, and then Samu gets injured as well, and they still have two strikers. These two strikers, as I said, Gul and Moffi, they don't score a lot of goals, but they were really, really useful. And I think they were key of the part of the success of the team this season.
Another player who was signed this season is Oskar Pietuszewski. We spoke in the past about him, the young Polish winger, 17 years old. I mean, his market value is already skyrocketed. I assume this, with what he's shown now in Portugal in the second half of the season, that market value is only going to accelerate even more.
Yeah, I mean, he's so young, 17 years old, and when Porto bought him in the winter transfer window, I really thought that he was going to start in the B team, in the secondary team. But the reality is that now he's a starter for FC Porto, and no one thinks that he should not be a starter. I mean, he just gained his place in the team in a way no one was expecting, because Porto had good or has good players for that position. But the truth is, even if Pietuszewski is so young, he's only 17 years old, he came to Portugal prepared to play for the first team, and he also scored very important goals. He made a lot of assists. He was a very important player for FC Porto this season. I mean, for me, the Porto's winter transfer window was almost perfect. They bought not only Pietuszewski, who now is a regular starter for the team, they also bought Moffi, the striker I was talking about before, which was also very important for them. They bought Thiago Silva, although his age, he's a very good center back still, and he was a starter in a lot of matches of Porto in this second half of the season. And then they bought another player, Seko Fofana, who is not a regular starter, but he also scored very important goals and also helped Porto winning the title. So the way Porto performed in the winter transfer window this season, for me, was key for their success and for their winning the league. It was an amazing transfer window for the club. Players like Fofana and Moffi, they are actually on loan at the club. I don't think they will stay at Porto for the next season, but they helped a lot winning the league this year. So I think they were amazing signings for Porto.
But it wasn't just in the winter, right? I mean,
Right.
the one name that really stands out as well is Victor Froholt. the midfielder who they signed from Copenhagen ahead of the season. Since he arrived with a market value of 12 million euros. That's gone up to 22 million euros then in September. And then again in December, he went to 30 million euros.
Yes.
He is Copenhagen's record sale. Obviously, Porto have had many other players that they signed for the 20 million euro range. But he seems like a real bargain now, too. When you look at his statistics, 6 goals and 5 assists in Liga Portugal. I mean, he's been a tremendous signing for them.
Yes, and I think his current market value of 30 million euros, it's now very short for what he's showing in the Portuguese league. So I'm pretty sure that at the end of the month, we're going to upgrade him and to upgrade his value a lot, because in my personal opinion, he was the best player in the Portuguese league this season. And so it was also, therefore, the best signing of the season. It's just an amazing player. He arrived at Portugal with 19 years old. He's now 20 years old. And he's just, I don't know, Froholt, it's that very complete midfielder that seems to be everywhere in the pitch. You know, he does everything and he does it very well. So, yeah, it was an amazing signing for Porto. I'm not saying he's the best player in the Portuguese league, but this season specifically, he was the best player, probably the most decisive player to Porto's success this season. So, Porto had an amazing winter transfer window. They had also an amazing summer transfer window. But when we talk about Froholt, we are talking about the best signing of the league, in my opinion, and of course, the best signing of Porto this season. So, yeah, I was really surprised with the way he played. I also had my doubts about Froholt being a starter this season, but I mean, there's absolutely no doubts now. My only doubt now is that if Porto is going to be able to keep him in the squad for next season. Maybe the biggest European clubs will think that he still needs another season in the Portuguese league, and Porto next season is going to play the Champions League, and that's very important for them as well. So let's see what kind of offers Porto will receive for him in the summer, because I think Porto will receive a lot of offers for him. Let's see if those offers are enough to convince Porto to let him go. I think he has 80 million euros release clause, and I wouldn't be surprised if a club could reach maybe not 18 million euros, but a very high fee to try to sign Froholt, because he was just amazing all this season.
Yeah, I mean, 80 million euros would be also good news for Copenhagen, as they have a 10% sell-on,
Yes.
so they would love that. Another player who really impressed, he arrived from Saudi Arabia in June 2025, so also last summer. Scored 3 goals and 9 assists, and that's Gabri Veiga, Porto's number 10. At least that's the jersey number he wears, and returned from Saudi Arabia to European football, and his market value as a result has rebounded. He had a high market value of 30 million euros at one point. It's now at 25 million euros, but has gone up since he's been back in Portugal. And I assume Gonzalo, he's another player whose market value will continue to rise, considering the way he's been playing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think if you remember, Gabri Veiga was one of the most promising Spanish players when he was at Celta de Vigo some years ago. And I think we were all very surprised because he was so young and decided to move to Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Usually players that go there are older, but Gabri Veiga decided to make that step when he was just like 20 or 20 years old. Yeah, it was surprising, but he then decided to return to Europe, and I think it was the best decision for his career. He was also one of the best players of Porto this season, and I think we will recognize this name, Rodrigo Mora, who is also one of the most promising Portuguese players, and specifically Porto players. Last season, Rodrigo Mora performed very well, and everyone was thinking that this was going to be the season where Rodrigo Mora was going to explode and going to play so well that then he will move to a top European club. But the thing is that with this new coach, Francesco Farioli, Porto plays with more physicality than creativity, you know? And Gabri Veiga is a very creative player, but he also has this physical dimension that Rodrigo Mora still doesn't have because Rodrigo Mora is so young, you know? But the truth is that Gabri Veiga, right now, it's a better player. And like I said, everyone was expecting Rodrigo Mora to be one of the star players for Porto this season, but because of the arrival of Gabri Veiga, that just didn't happen. Gabri Veiga suits better the Farioli tactics, Porto's style of play. And I think he was also one of the key players for this league's title for Porto. It's an amazing player. I'm surprised that he hasn't been called up for the Spanish national team recently. He probably doesn't have many chances to go to the World Cup because the World Cup now is just 1 month or 1 month, some weeks away, so he will probably not be there. But I think he has done an amazing season and probably one of the best Spanish players in the world nowadays.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one final name I was kind of curious about was William Gomez. He was signed last winter, and with last winter, I don't mean this last winter, the one before that.
From the
he
last
arrived for
season,
Sao Paulo. But has made tremendous progress as well. 8 goals, 1 assist in 26 games. Didn't play all the games, but his market value
True.
has also been on the rise. Is now at 20 million euros. When he first arrived, he was at 6 million and went to 9 million. Assume that was because of the transfer fee, right? But now at 20 million euros, he's another really interesting name if we can finish up on him.
Yeah, the thing with William Gomez is that I think that everyone here recognizes his potential and the quality that he already has. He's only 20 years old, so he's very young. But the thing is that he's not a regular starter at Porto because Porto has amazing players and it's difficult to be a regular starter in this team. But even playing a lot of matches from the bench, starting in the bench and then going to the pitch, he still has great numbers, as you were saying. So he's a very decisive player. He scored important goals in the first match against Sporting, in Sporting Stadium in Alvalade. He scored the winning goal against them. So yeah, I mean, William Gomez is that kind of player that at least me, I look at him and I say, this player could be a regular starter, but he's not because of the quality Porto has in their squad. Still, I think he could be one of the key players of Porto next season. Of course, that we have to see who is Porto going to sell, who is Porto going to buy in the summer. But I think if William Gomez stays in the club, and I think he will, mainly because of what I was saying, because he's not a regular starter yet. So I don't think that Porto will receive like tremendous offers from other clubs for him. There are probably clubs that are going to keep an eye on him in the summer, but I don't think it's going to be enough to convince Porto to let him go. So maybe he will be even more important next season. Let's see.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Gonzalo. This was a great overview of what's going on with Porto and the tremendous season that they've been playing. And of course, as always, there's so many interesting names to keep an eye on. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine.